All right, everybody, it's June 25th, Thursday, 2015, and the Nefarium, as you can tell, has been busy this last week. Boy, oh boy. I'm sure most of you know that the fast track authorization passed through the Congress that represents all the corporations in America, but not the people. This, in my opinion, is a thoroughly unconstitutional measure. Uh, all these steps to fast track and give the president authority that he doesn't need. And if you thought you heard the great sucking sound with NAFTA and GATT, just wait. But anyway, I don't want to complain about that. I don't want to complain about the ongoing struggles or crisis in the Ukraine, although I've had a lot of articles come in. There's something else going on, and this week has been very peculiar in that I've been getting a lot of articles from various people that read the blogs on the blog site about space. And one of the articles that I received, I had to read this twice to really, and I still don't know that I'm perceiving all the depths of it, but this is a long-term story I think that we have to watch. This is an article that appeared on the Huffington Post with the headline, NASA working with National Nuclear Security Administration on plan to use nukes on Doomsday asteroid. Now, why is this so unusual? We've been hearing talk about this a lot lately, but let me put it into context. For those of you who don't know about the Rosen affidavit, Dr. Carol Rosen used to be a professional associate of Dr. Wernher von Braun. And according to her, Dr. von Braun told her about a plan that was going to be used, a long-term plan to weaponize space. All right. And we've certainly talked about that whole issue here on these news and views, and we've talked about it on the actual written blogs on the website. But this plan, according to von Braun, what he told Rosen, was first communists were going to be the enemy, and therefore they had to build nuclear weapons, missile defense systems to weaponize space. Then it was going to be terrorists, and then nations of concern, and then asteroids, and finally ET. And if you've been following the asteroid meme lately, they've been ratcheting this up ever since we first heard about the movie Armageddon, which I want to talk about as we get into this article. But there's a number of statements in here that are really very, very curious. So I want to read portions of this article to you. It begins with these 4 paragraphs. If NASA has its way, the human race won't be going the way of the dinosaurs anytime soon. The space agency is teaming up with the National Nuclear Security Administration to work on a planetary defense plan to deflect a potential doomsday asteroid so it doesn't strike Earth, according to the New York Times. Last week's announcement came ahead of the first official Asteroid Day on June 30th, a day that scientists hope will raise awareness of the threat posed by near-Earth objects and encourage governments to develop a better plan to track them. Okay, now that's very interesting right there in and of itself. But let's go on with what the article says. June 30th is the anniversary of the 1908 impact of an asteroid in Siberia, and I'm one of those that disputes that that was an asteroid, folks, that wiped out some 800 square miles of forest. The surprise impact of the 2013 Chelyabinsk meteor, which caused a 500 kiloton airburst over Russia, shows potentially threatening space rocks are still out there. Now, this is what I find very interesting here. This is the first estimation that I'm aware of about the Chelyabinsk meteor having been a 500 kiloton airburst. Now, frankly, folks, I find that a little questionable because if it were that kind of an airburst, there would have been considerably more damage. As I recall, the the meteor was considerably lower than that. But in any case, that's the first time I've seen any reference to an actual yield for the Chelyabinsk meteor. Now, further down, I want you to listen to this. In 2013, researchers at the Asteroid Deflection Research Center at Iowa State University came up with a plan to use a two-section spacecraft to first smash a hole in the asteroid, then dump a nuclear weapon in the crater to blow it up. All right, and that's very similar, if you'll recall, to the plot of the Armageddon movie with Bruce Willis, where they actually land on an asteroid, drill into the body, and then plant a nuclear device and blow up the asteroid. Further on, the trick, some dispute this idea that you have to blow it up. So others are talking about nudging it. The trick is to gently nudge the asteroid out of harm's way and not to blow it up, the agency states on its Near-Earth Objects website, and that's NASA talking. Now, further on, however, listen carefully. We're building up to something here. For the far more numerous asteroids that are smaller than a few hundred meters in diameter, if we have adequate early warning of several years to a decade, a weighted robotic spacecraft would be targeted to collide with the object, thereby modifying its velocity to nudge the trajectory just enough that the Earth impact would be avoided, the space agency wrote in another report. Now stop and consider. This is the second time since the Chelyabinsk meteor that we've heard about calls for detection systems. You recall that 1 month prior to the Chelyabinsk meteor, Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev talked about the need to develop an asteroid detection system and defense system, and that the whole world should be involved, but that Russia was going to go ahead and do it anyway if it couldn't talk the rest of the world into getting on board. So in other words, now we're seeing the West copy this idea. And this, folks, please understand what this means. This means putting into place around the world an immense new detection grid, a space detection grid for asteroids. In other words, long distance detection. Now, I don't know about you, but it doesn't take much to make the leap from detecting asteroids and long-term, long-distance asteroid threats to planet Earth, and a military use. Okay, remember the context of the Rosen Affidavit: communism, terrorists, nations of concern, asteroids, and then finally extraterrestrials. All right. So in other words, we've seen that sequence copy out almost exactly since von Braun told this to Dr. Rosen back in the days that he was still alive. Now, add to that paragraph this very next statement, and this was the statement that really leapt off the page at me. This is a statement I haven't heard in this context put quite this way before. The problem, the agency said, is that we may not have several years to a decade. In other words, they're adding the element of urgency to this. We've got to do this now, and we've got to develop the means, if you put it in the context of the rest of this article, to develop nuclear capability to deliver nuclear weapons to an asteroid now. Now, again, I'm one of those that thinks nuclear weapons might be as obsolescent or obsolete as the dodo bird. What's really being called on here is for a new kind of space weapons race. And let's be honest, even if we're still talking about nuclear weapons, this would ratchet up geopolitical tensions immensely. Because if one country claimed to have detected an asteroid and launched a nuclear weapon, that could conceivably be misinterpreted by other thermonuclear powers as some sort of first strike. And with the tensions between the United States and Russia right now, this may not be a very good thing. So I think as a result of that possibility, we're going to see now in the next couple of years, this is a long-term thing we're going to have to watch. We're going to see in the next couple of years calls for internationalizing this defense grid and any planetary defense and detection capability that might be developed. This is going to be a very, very interesting situation to watch. Now, there's one final thing here that really grabbed me, and this is at the very end of this article. It says the founders of Asteroid Day, which include Queen guitarist and astrophysicist Brian May, have created the 100X Asteroid Declaration, which calls on governments to increase by 100-fold the discovery and tracking of near-Earth objects. Along with May, backers of the declaration include Bill Nye, Carolyn Shoemaker, Brian Cox, Chris Hadfield, Mark Kelly, Lord Martin Rees, and Richard Dawkins, as well as Schweikart and his fellow B612 co-founder Ed Lu. Now, that statement grabbed me because this is another indicator now, I think, of what we're going to see happen. You're going to see, let's call it the trendy progressive elite, the trendy progressive artist class, jump on board on the bandwagon to promote this idea that we need asteroid detection defense systems now. Okay, remember that urgency. So this is a story that in the middle of everything else going on in the last couple of weeks regarding space, this is a story that just got kind of plopped right in there. We have the sense of urgency. We have kind of trendy artistic elites pushing this idea. And we have now the West talking not only about a planetary detection grid that needs to be beefed up 100 times. In other words, take the current capabilities and increase it by 2 orders of magnitude. All right, this will be enormously expensive. Now, there's one final little thing I want to add here to this, and that is just this last week, and I'm planning to blog about some of these issues in the written blogs, but just this last 2.5 weeks, NASA's budget was upgraded to about $1 trillion. I read a story somewhere that this was a huge budget increase. So in other words, something is going on here, folks. Something huge is going on. And I strongly suspect it doesn't have much to do with asteroids. There's a sense of urgency to this now. They're getting the elites on board to start pushing this idea. And I give it a few years before they're going to start changing, perhaps, to that final stage of Dr. Rosen's affidavit. There's a whole lot going on in space. This is one aspect of the story I think we need to watch carefully, especially now that we have all of those stories about Ceres, the Lights on Ceres coming out of NASA, supposedly the Pyramids on Ceres. This is an asteroid, folks. So in other words, I think this story is coupled to all of the little suggestive indications that something is afoot on Ceres, and it may not be entirely natural. So this is definitely one to watch over the long term, folks. That's it for me. We'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye, and God bless everybody.